You mentioned in your comments here the importance of Brexit and how that's going to impact the security dynamic in Europe. UK is very much still committed to the Atlantic Alliance, has made the case that NATO remains the cornerstone of British commitment, and so a conduit to cooperate with its European countries, even if it's not in the EU. From your standpoint, what are the big challenges that remain? Because you did spend quite a lot of time discussing the issue and bringing it up. What are your concerns, but also what are the potential opportunities?
Well, Brexit is making a big difference in the European security context. There are two direct consequences. One of them is that the balance between EU and non-EU European allies is tilting more in favor of the non-EU allies, with the largest defense player in Europe, at least one of the two largest defense players in Europe, leaving the EU. The second thing is that we have to reinvent the relationship between Britain and the EU, including in the field of defense. And my concern here is that it is very important to see Britain as part of that conversation in Europe, so that we can continue to work in an EU-NATO environment efficiently. Having said this, Britain is very engaged in a NATO environment, will continue to be, and NATO is at the very heart of European security affairs. So it's not as if Britain was disappearing from Europe, either in the NATO context or in the broader picture. But of course, the devil is in the details. Will the future European projects be open to Britain? Where will the British industry stand in the picture? How can NATO and EU cooperate with a Britain that is no longer an EU partner? We already had issues on associating non-EU European countries such as Turkey or Norway. But tomorrow, this challenge will be there with Britain, which is all the more demanding. So all these things impact the way we address this. We are on a very positive spin in terms of EU-NATO cooperation at the moment. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and Federica Mogherini have developed a very interesting agenda of working more closely together. That needs Britain to be part of that conversation, and this is going to be a very important part of our effort to make that happen.
And you have a very good working relationship with Jorge Domecq, who is the head of the European Defense Agency.
Yes, indeed. Within the European institutions, Jorge Domecq is, of course, at the heart of the projects as the chief executive of the European Defense Agency. But there are also new players coming in. The European Commission is now ready to throw money at defense, especially in the field of R&D. This is something that is very important in the European environment and potentially a game changer, including for NATO. So we want to work with them. In the European Action Service, External Action Service, there are also projects to foster defense and European role in crisis management, which is something that we need to work very closely on. And finally, when we tackle cyber threats, information warfare, this should be done in a very close relationship between NATO and the EU, because if we are able to work together, we'll be able to respond to those multiple challenges.